Welcome to the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast, where we explore popular practices, songs, and ideas in the modern church world in the light of Sola Scriptura and Tota Scriptura. I'm Cody Fields, president of Westminster Effects. Go buy stuff for your guitar, westminstereffects.com. Make sure you leave or subscribe or whatever. I don't know. Leave a review and subscribe, and you know what the deal is. At this point, no one really cares. I'm not joined in person by the Right Reverend Bradley Cox, but via the interwebs, doing his best Jersey Shore fist pump, we have...
Hey, this song's a banger, man. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I can't. It's self-promotion.
I'm not trying to shame you for that fist pump. It was a good one.
It was good. Anyways, John Ross, Westminster Effects artist, Augsburgian Christian, apparently temporary air guitar player for the Westminster Effects Doxology podcast intro. I was also the real guitar player for it, but yeah,
also yes, yeah, you did that whole thing.
I did, and the outro. The other crap's all from like YouTube Creator Studio because it's like Creative Commons free. But yeah, the intro and outro. Yeah. Anyways, I'm here.
So even when you're not here, you're here.
Indeed.
For what that's worth.
That was my whole ploy.
Yeah. So I suppose I should give you a little bit of news that I told you that I wanted your live reaction to.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is public in the Doxology podcast world. It's not like it's a secret or anything. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not on Facebook anymore, so I'm in the dark.
So are you completely off at this point?
So I've deactivated my account, but I haven't deleted it because we have. So I'm afraid to delete it, not because I want to lose. I'm worried about losing Facebook stuff. I've downloaded all the data. I've got an Oculus Quest, right? It's technically hooked to Meta, but I've got like Instagram that I don't do anything with, but I should. Mm-hmm. I just don't know, right? I don't know if I delete it, like what's going to go away.
Sure.
Because I didn't really spend any time really paying attention to when accounts moved from like Facebook accounts to Meta accounts on the Oculus, and I've linked like my Instagram account. Like I don't want to lose that because that's like still halfway decent,
right?
But yeah, so it's deactivated, which keeps me off of Facebook Marketplace, which is
which is healthy.
That's worth its weight in gold.
Literally, that is literally worth its weight in gold.
So I am completely in the dark about whatever hot bombs you're about to drop.
It's not really a bomb, but so this Sunday, I'm going to preach my first sermon.
Whoa!
Yeah. So if you remember Jesse Harper, who we had back,
I do,
a while ago, he is pastoring a house church now.
Okay, cool.
And
good for him.
I don't remember what he has to study for, but he doesn't have time this week or in 2 weeks to actually prepare for that. So he asked me to do it.
Well, how about that?
And I was asking some people, basically looking for a way out. So I text my dad and he says, "Why wouldn't you?" And then I told Bradley and he went, "Yeah," and then clapped his hands.
Of course.
I was like, I'm not getting out of it then.
So you're preaching, but you're also writing it, right?
Correct. No, I'm buying a Perry Noble sermon off of Bible Gateway or YouVersion. I don't know. I have this lie concocted so well that I couldn't even get my source straight.
Yeah, right. Well, no, that's fantastic. I remember my first time.
I'm going to put the explicit tag on this.
Yeah, right. When a congregation loves a man very much. No, that's fantastic. At least it'll be better than, hey, John, you know how you hate those movie parable sermons? Why don't you go ahead and do one?
I didn't tell you what I was going to preach on, which is the Green Mile. No, I'm just kidding.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hacksaw Ridge.
No, I'm doing Ephesians 1. I figured do something that's fairly straightforward and that I know really well would probably be the best move for this. So
nope, that's That's good. So one of the things so I started doing this this past fall. One of the things that I've been doing so the last session was 2 Sundays ago, so not this past week, but the preceding 5. Is I'm continuing to ramp up as the instructor for the basics, the new members course here at the church.
Oh yeah.
I mentioned that a couple times, and this previously I'd done the welcome and the devotion, kind of the summary or the recap a little bit. But the way that we do our new members course is unique, and so this took a little bit of. It's not like I have a syllabus to go off of, which you'd expect, but this is how it works. It's modeled after how we do our confirmation / catechetical instruction, where you the participants have video content that the pastors have produced. Well, technically, Inspira Media, which is a professional production company that was initially a child of our congregation. They produced it, but our pastors, are the ones in it that do the video content on anything from Old Testament origins, church tradition, sacraments, soteriology. I mean, the whole thing. Sometimes not using those words, but nonetheless. So they have the video content, and it's either 1 or 2 videos, usually 2 videos per week. There's dive deeper sections that you can link to that hop over to some different resources around the web to help dive deeper into things. And then after that, they're invited to kind of ask questions, right? And it's in a format where it's submitted via a form that kind of pops up after the video. So the questions then are really what make up our in-person class time. So we have this kind of standard boilerplate that's in the video content, but then we customize the class sessions based upon what that body of people in the class, are asking, right?
Interesting, yeah.
Like what, because, things hit differently at different times, right?
And you're fielding, the obvious questions like, why did Martin Luther hate Jews at the end of his life and stuff like that?
No one has asked that.
I'm disappointed.
Now I've got this deep ingrained fear that we're like raising up a congregation of anti-Semites, just like under the radar. It's not the case. I don't think so. We openly acknowledge that although we call ourselves Lutherans, he made some mistakes. Hence Augsburgian, right?
Right.
Right. Anyways, so that's all well and good. But when you're a guy like me who can carry on a conversation just fine, have a dialogue, have a discourse, some of these people aren't doing their homework until like the night before, right? And so like there's not a lot of time to answer these or to formulate a lesson plan based on these questions, right? So
right.
For someone who's been in the pastoral and teaching ministry for some time, that's a little bit easier than someone who has what I would call a substantial academic knowledge of the subject, who needs to convey that to someone who is simply seeking a practical understanding of the subject. Our senior pastor / director of ministries, Michael Eckelkamp, just a wonderful servant of Christ, gave me probably the best advice I've ever gotten from anybody, and it took me time to chew on it. And this is why I bring up this whole thing, not to steal thunder, but to actually go back and point to you, because what he said was lean into your weakness. I didn't understand what that meant. And until about a week later, when I was going to go into the first session that I was, kind of teaching the whole thing, answering the questions for. And what it amounted to was my weaknesses, as I've, kind of discovered them in this context, are that I'm not a pastor. That's a weakness that I place on myself, right? You don't need to be a ordained minister to teach people, right?
Right.
It's not a prerequisite, but I made it a weakness for myself. I really like the minutia, the details, like going into things and really deeply exploring like types and shadows and church tradition and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Like that level of minutia excites me. And that's a weakness as well, because that level of minutia is not, it's going to be more of a stumbling block to the people who are seeking to understand these things, right? At the get-go, right? That's like 300 level class. This is 101. And so what I realized I had to do was simply say, hey, I'm a nerd. I like facts and figures and linguistic analysis and all of this stuff. And I may say words that you don't understand. And if I do, I apologize. And I ask that.
And if if I do, you can Google it.
What I effectively said was, and if I do, raise your hand. Let me know that I've done that I have said something that was difficult to grasp, right? And it really amounted to, I'm just a nerd. I'm not like, yeah, I have a college education in theology and systematics. Fantastic. But that was also a while ago. I'm also a computer engineer who likes playing guitar and working on trucks and flight simulators, and I have 3 kids. Like, I have so much else going on that, like, this isn't my main thing. I'm here as a peer.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to walk through this together with me, and maybe we can even nerd out a little bit too. And so leaning into my weakness and acknowledging that, right? Acknowledging where even if they're self-defined shortcomings, come from and what they look like, man, that made all the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. Things to keep in mind. Yeah.
That's fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Blessings on that.
Yeah. It'll be something.
You're just gonna go in some sort of trance, and like sinners of the hands of an angry God is just gonna spill from your mouth.
I've somehow, even though I've only listened to it like twice in my entire life, it will.
I used a massive chunk of that.
Good times.
In a Reformation Day sermon before.
So even though I've only listened to it twice, I've just somehow absorbed every single piece of it, and it all comes out.
As the Spirit gives utterance, my friend.
Yeah. So because of that, I haven't had adequate time to really prepare a proper topic. So how about we just do a big ol' Inquisition, because we got some fun questions.
Let's do it. I'm glad for that.
And this is the Inquisition, using royalty-free bumper music from YouTube, apparently, where you ask us questions and we answer them on the fly. And you submit those questions via a weekly post in the Westminster Effects Doxology Podcast Lounge. So, as is tradition, we start with Brian Morris. And he asks, is the content of the book of Song of Songs appropriate for use in the Lord's Day service? Should it influence our songs? I would argue yes, but I just thought it would be a good discussion, and some dingus on the internet told me no the other day.
That's great, dingus. Perfect.
Yeah. And
all Scripture is God breathed.
All of it
useful for teaching, encouragement, reproach, so on and so forth.
Can I get spicy here?
Do it.
So, okay, we understand that, one, marriage is an image of Christ in the church, point blank.
Right.
And Paul uses, and a man shall leave his mother and father and cling to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we understand that, and we understand that Jesus said that all of Scripture, the entire Old Testament, is about him, your types and shadows.
Right.
The only reason we don't want to say that the Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, depending on what you like to call it, is about Christ in the church is because our society is so pornified.
Yeah.
And we think of sex as dirty, and we kind of blush about it. So we don't want to think about it that way.
I don't think that's spicy at all. I think that's accurate.
Somebody's going to find it spicy.
Although, in the summer camp days, not when I was running one, but when I was a counselor, actually when I was a camper, we all knew about Song of Songs, and we were like, whatever. It is what it is. It's
right.
It was taught to us from a young age that it's a depiction of the love that Christ has for the church. Perfect. However, the ones that got us were like things like Ezekiel 23:20, to the point where it's still in my head, that chapter and verse reference. And you probably would have to put the explicit tag on it if I read
that's the one I'm thinking of, right?
It involves
horses.
Yes, allusions to those of the equine persuasion. Yeah.
Ezekiel 23 is it does not pull any punches. You would get fired for just quoting that.
Right.
In most churches.
Get the Gettys to do something with that. With that.
I think you have to turn that into a death metal song. I think you have no choice, but if you're going to turn that into music, it has to be like the most extreme form of metal possible.
Absolutely.
Obviously taking
preferably in a format where you can't fully understand the words.
Right. So like
horses,
this isn't
donkeys.
This isn't just an obscure reference, because if you've seen Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, then you have seen this band perform, and that band is Cannibal Corpse.
Mm-hmm.
I do not recommend them for listening by anyone, because they are obscene all the time, and it's atrocious. However, do it in that style, and it works.
There we go.
There you go. So we just went from Song of Songs to Cannibal Corpse.
So Brian Morris, sounds like you need to buy a Mesa and and start writing some liturgical music based upon the Old Testament there, bud.
Yeah. There we go. All right. Matthew Winter. He says there isn't a consensus on this in Reformdom, and the confessions seem to point toward the view, and he would agree, that sanctification is monergistic. Yet many Reformed pastors, at least in the way, preach... Sorry, I'm just reading this, and it seems to be a typo. Seem to believe in synergism when it comes to sanctification. So which is it? So, to define terms, when you talk about monergism or monergistic, that is one-party acting. Right. So us being of the Reformed, and in John's case, the Lutheran persuasion, salvation is monergistic. Point
Absolutely
blank.
Correct.
God does all of it, and we have nothing to do with it, except Edwards would say the only thing you contribute to it is the sin that made it necessary.
Right, and Luther would say passively receiving, and then actively responding. But
right, and so
that actively responding piece is where the sanctification component comes in.
Okay, sure. So the synergism synergistic is two parties acting in concert, effectively. Right. So the Lutheran tradition would be synergistic on sanctification then. Or is this where you're just gonna appeal to mystery?
No, you know us well. No, the Lutheran salvific, the Lutheran soteriology, absolutely monergistic.
Yes. Lutheran
sanctification is that it is the work of the Spirit flowing through the life of a regenerate Christian.
Right.
So it is monergistic in a sense. I mean, the Lutheran understanding of sanctification is that a regenerate Christian cannot help but do these things that would be classified as good works. They cannot help but do them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are they're not what is expected of a Christian. They are the behavior of a Christian. The default. This is what they do. If you are, I mean, pick your adjective or your adverb. If you are saved, if you are regenerated, whatever. You cannot help but live a sanctified life. Does that mean that everything you would do is sanctified? No. Sinful human nature until the time which we are fully reconciled to the Father and the work of Christ is made complete upon his return, right? But it's a matter of where that flows from. And it flows from the redemptive act, from that salvation that we have through Christ, and it is the Holy Spirit acting that work of sanctification in us. Luther's explanation to the third article of the Apostles' Creed, and I may have to read the entire thing in my memory because I can't just jump to an index. I believe that I cannot by my own reason or strength believe in Jesus Christ my Lord or come to him, but the Holy Spirit has called me by the gospel, enlightened me with his gifts, sanctified and kept me in the one true faith. Just as he calls, gathers, enlightens, and sanctifies the whole Christian church on earth and keeps it with Jesus Christ in the one true faith. That's something, so on and so forth.
Right.
I think that's pretty dang good.
God doing all of it, effectively.
Right, absolutely.
It's akin to saying that we are justified by faith alone, and that when God gives us that faith, it is a living faith.
Right. It's James, right? It points directly to James, where a lot of people will be like, gotcha, faith without works is dead. Like, no. If we take what we have in James and even apply it to when Jesus is walking along the path and sees the fig tree that bears no fruit, right? The evidence of a healthy thing is its fruit, right? It's not that the fruit is a part of making it alive. The fruit is the evidence that it is.
Right.
So, yeah. And that absolutely flows from a monergistic view of the action. It is our new man, our regenerate self that only exists by the power of the Spirit indwelling in us because of that reconciled relationship with the Father through Christ, that we are able to do any of that stuff. So it absolutely has to come from a monergistic viewpoint. If it gets to the point where, well, I'm saved, and so now I'm going to decide to do the right thing, right? Sure, we have decisions. We have decisions. But even Luther would acknowledge that our decisions are bound by Christ, right? That he writes about this in Bondage of the Will. It's like, yeah, like we have free will, but because of our relationship with the Father, because of the Spirit indwelling in us, our will is bound to the will of God because of that.
Yeah.
Do we rebel? Yes, because we're sinful human beings. As a constant reminder of not only our need for grace, but the fact that grace exists. But
yeah. Let's do a fun one from Padre, my dad, Stan Fields, who has recently thrown out his back several times because he won't stretch his legs. Padre, stretch your dang legs, especially with how much we're riding the bike recently.
Oh, I was going to say pole dancing's hard, but if bikes is the on,
that's it. I have to do the explicit tag now. So he asks, chiropractors, are they valid or voodoo?
Okay, so I've had to look into this an awful lot. Because, I'm pretty squarely in the voodoo camp, but my wife is like, my chiropractor does wonders. I'm like, for $25 2 times a week. But I did some looking because there was a person who was on our elder team at church. He's a great guy, despite for some anti-vax leanings, but he also is a chiropractor. And this is what so take that, And then my wife's chiropractor, who is also kind of he owns the building that my wife's studio is in, a fantastic guy. I've been to him, and I tell you what, he'll pop you and crack you, and you feel great. But the difference is striking. In like, you go into Bo, my wife's chiropractor, and he comes in and it's like, oh yeah, you're tight. Things feel, like you're not all where you should be. And he'll rock and roll you for a few minutes, put some biofreeze on your back and send you on your way. Mm-hmm. Right. And that honestly seems effective. Right. There's the TENS machines and the things that work with kind of like, muscle tension mm-hmm. and, skeletal alignment, that sort of stuff. I think that's okay. I mean, there's an entire branch of traditional medicine called osteopathy. In fact, many of you may be going to a general practitioner who doesn't have an MD after the name, that has instead a DO after their name, which is fully licensed to practice medicine. Surgeons are DOs. Dr. Mike, the famous doctor on YouTube, he's a DO. But that in itself adds credence to the fact that, yeah, skeletal alignment makes sense. So take that. Then there's this other camp that is inspired by the Palmer School. So this is in Davenport, Iowa, near where I grew up. And this Palmer guy claimed to be is kind of recognized as the father of chiropractic. Kind of came up with all of these things, invented these words, invented these procedures. That's freaking voodoo.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where, like, oh, I have hypothyroidism, right? I have to take medicine every day for the rest of my life. A Palmer chiropractor would say, oh, I can fix that.
Right.
I can fix that.
Right.
No, you freaking can't.
Right.
Like, you can't fix, like, stuff. It just doesn't work. Okay? However, people are more inclined to say, oh yeah, it totally fixed this. I lost weight. I feel better. I don't have depression because I started going to this chiropractor. Is that it? Or did you start making an intentional investment in your wellness mm-hmm. that the evidence, the fruit of which, going a question back, is you're obviously being intentional about going to a practitioner, right?
Yep.
But what else are you doing? Are you eating better? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping better? Are you drinking more water because this chiropractor told you to? Like, so yeah, there's like 33% of the trade that's perfectly fine, but it has its limitations. Like, you can't expect a dentist to be like, I'm going to fill this cavity and your knee's going to feel a whole heck of a lot better when I'm done. Like, it doesn't work.
That's so true.
You have to find one who understands that their field has its limitations as well.
Right.
And isn't going to go and, like, who absolutely supports healthy living, healthy eating, healthy activity, but is going to say that a healthy lifestyle is what impacts health, not crack-a-lackin' and expecting, oh yeah, there you go, you no longer have freaking lupus or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so I have a subscription to our local Joint Chiropractic, which is kind of a chain, like a national chain.
The Joint? Yeah. I always smile when I see that. It's like The Joint, a chiropractic place. I'm like, that's clever.
Right, it is. Especially since there's no CBD involved, if it's The Joint. Chuckle. Anyway. But it's very much like the first one that you described. It's, hey, you got something going on, let's move it back in place, send you on your way. And and particularly, like, hey, maybe stretch, maybe ice, maybe have better posture for this particular thing you're doing or whatever. And so I actually have a regular occurrence of a rib head that likes to get just a little bit out of place right by my shoulder blade where my guitar strap runs. Mm. And the relief that I get from going to the chiropractor when that happens is immediate. So there is something to be said about that. there is something to be said about, things like dry needling. So going to the chiropractor in combination with getting dry needled pretty aggressively has helped me with an issue that I've had in a nerve in my hip for the last year or so. For the entire month of November 2021, I couldn't feel my right leg on the surface.
I recall receiving some sultry photos of you being aggressively dry needled.
Yes. So, look that up on YouTube. It's a lot of fun. And by fun, I mean it's torture, but it really does help.
Right.
However, neither my chiropractor nor my dry needling practitioner will tell you that what they're doing is going to, alleviate emphysema.
Right. It's not a one-time, like, this is the solution to this. Like, this is palliative care. This helps, but you also have to do these other things. You have to hydrate. You have to increase your posture. You need to increase your activity level. You need to stretch, Padre. Like, you need to do these things.
Yep.
Like, it's just not like, well, you've ruined it again. Let me pop it back into place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like with my left knee, I have some, patellar femoral syndrome, where the kneecap wants to track laterally somewhat and run over the femur, which can cause popping and discomfort and whatever. If the more I'm on the bike, the less it hurts. But also, I did do physical therapy, and that didn't do anything. But when I got dry needled, it helped release those muscles to enable me to do more exercise to then keep that up.
There's no one-stop shop for personal care.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Go stretch your legs, Padre. Hamstrings and glutes.
On that, my son asked me the other day, Dad, and this was my 12-year-old, mind you, what's like the scientific name for the butt crack? Like, because it started like, the butt has such a cool name, like gluteus maximus or whatever. I'm like, technically that's the muscle, right? And he's like, well, what's the butt crack called? And so I had to look it up.
What is it?
Intergluteal cleft.
I've learned something today. The intergluteal cleft.
I'm trying to include that in as much conversation as I legally can. I like that.
Oh, man. So, next question. From Drew Medin, he asks, what's your summary of the book of Job? And what would you say Job is referencing in 3:25, in chapter 3, verse 25, when he says that the thing he has feared has come upon him? Well, I think one of the big stories of Job is God's sovereignty over every event in our lives.
Right.
Because Satan brings certain calamities upon Job, but he has to get permission from God first.
Right.
So he's on a leash. You also have, Toby Sumpter said this at the Fight, Laugh, Feast conference a few months ago. We have to wrestle with the fact that in God-inspired scripture, you have chapter upon chapter upon chapter in the book of Job's friends telling nothing but lies about God. So there's some compare and contrast there to do too, right? While God is sovereign over literally everything, ultimately, for his glory, I think you tied in, and everybody that knows me is like, oh, he's going to Romans 8 again, to conform us to the image of his son, right? Because that's what you end up seeing toward the end of the book,
right.
is Job is more conformed to the image of the son. I know that my Redeemer lives, right? So that's what I got.
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, to answer the question about what does he mean by the thing that I feared most, without some additional study, I don't want to speak to that. I don't want to guess, right? Like I haven't done a deep dive in Job in a while, and I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak out of turn on that. But I'm sure there are some brilliant commentaries by by respected teachers that we could turn to. And perhaps that's our encouragement to you is go check one of those out and report back. What do you find? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a computer engineer and Cody builds pedals. So ultimately, we would probably use the same resources that we are right now encouraging you look at.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If I had to guess, for the thing that I fear comes upon me and what I dread befalls me, I could think immediately of either the circumstances that I feared, like my greatest fear being these things happening, or it could be the thing that I fear is God. Right? His dread has befallen him. That, but that's without doing any study at all. That's just my guess, kind of off the top of my head.
Sure, I think any reasonably informed guess would probably fall kind of in that arena.
Yeah. So one more question, and this is a fun one from Ferenc Zenley across the pond in Hungary. He asks great questions for our largely American listenership. He asks, do you vote for presidents for the memes, or is there a purpose?
Oh, man. Okay, so, I mean...
So the answer is yes.
Right. I mean, you got to keep in mind that we've only had 3 meme era presidents, right? Like, memes in the sense of like, what we know them as, something so socially shareable.
There's basically since the dawn of the Republic, you've had political cartoons and things like that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like images of Ronald Reagan with like a movie camera off to the side, and like in one frame he's acting, in one frame he's governing, and whatever. Like, or George W. and in a cowboy hat, and whatever, like
with enormous ears.
Yeah. Didn't we already mention Ross Perot?
No, I think that was before we started recording.
That may have been. Well, y'all missed out. No, it's a funny question, but I can only imagine to the rest of the world. I mean, we've had a incredibly old,
oh my goodness,
career politician who also has moments of lucidity and can be a complete badass. He went to Ukraine in wartime. Like, that hasn't happened in freaking years.
I mean,
right?
But if we're being honest, he did do that for damage control.
True, but nonetheless.
But the optics are good.
The optics are good, and he looks pretty cool in aviators. So we have that guy. Before him, we had a reality TV star. I mean, you could say he's a real estate mogul, but that really didn't pan out all that terribly well.
He wasn't a very good steak salesman either.
Right. Maybe we should just be as generous as possible and be like, our previous president had a cameo in Home Alone too, or whatever it was.
That's the crowning achievement of his life, honestly.
Right. But like every politician, every president, there's something that we can pick out, except for Abraham Lincoln, because
he did have seances in the White House. He did have that.
But he had a pretty dope beard.
Yeah.
And there's a burger restaurant in Lincoln named after him.
Yeah, but he grew the beard because a little girl wrote to him and said, "You're way too skinny and you need a beard."
Right. Right.
Maybe that would solve all of our country's problems if we elected a president with a beard.
There we go.
When was the last time we had one with any facial hair at all? It's been at least 70 years.
Great.
At the very least.
The only one I can picture is Grant. Like, that's the only one I can picture. I mean, of course, Teddy had the mustache.
Yeah.
But after that, I mean,
I can't think of one.
Facial hair was. I mean, you got to remember, like from the 40s through the 70s, facial hair was considered to be, counterculture, right? Clean shaven, thin tie, all that stuff.
Yep.
So, yeah. No, technically, we vote for presidents based upon political alignment and the quality of their character.
But only technically.
Sometimes we need to make concessions one way or the other. And ultimately, what really matters, yes, the popular vote for president does matter, but what ultimately matters is the vote for our elected representatives in Senate and Congress.
Yes.
Who in turn make up our electoral college to be the great equalizer. At least that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And honestly, it's a brilliant system.
Oh, it is. But it's also the reason why at least for any time soon, we will never have a third-party candidate.
Right. Which, if we're being honest, any other, like the parliamentary systems of, say, Israel, like they cannot keep a government together.
Right.
Because it all relies on coalitions between different parties that all hate each other.
Exactly.
And then they elect a prime minister. And that actually seems messier to me than what we have over here.
Yeah.
Now over here, we don't get anything done federally,
right.
and that's on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe everybody else should learn from us and set up their governments to not do anything.
That's fair. I mean, it's expensive to do that.
Yeah,
but
because even in the EU, so I'll keep names out of this, but I've been talking with someone to possibly distribute some stuff in Europe. I don't want to talk out of turn and announce anything because nothing's official. But I can't repeat most of the words he used about the European Union. But he I can quote this. Socialists and bureaucrats are devils in our society. And he's not wrong.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, yeah. I mean, put your boots on, pull up your pants, get to work, participate, be a person.
Yeah.
Don't depend.
And honestly, we should be more focused about what's going on locally anyway.
Right. Yeah.
It has much more of an impact on your life than anything the federal government does. Now, that doesn't mean that the federal government never impacts your life. But even stuff like the COVID lockdowns, those were all state and local.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing imposed other than certain travel things of entering the country and stuff like that.
Right, or federal property.
Right, or federal property.
Which is well within the rights of the federal government to do.
Right, but in terms of like any kind of mask mandates or anything like that, that was all state and local government.
Right.
So get to work there.
Yeah.
I've spoken at my county council once before, where there was a spate of shootings at nightclubs, and someone had proposed that if you were going to perform music in Spartanburg County, then you had to get a background check through the sheriff's office. And I went in and told them that wasn't biblical. And that's what our Bill of Rights is based on. So, anyway. What are you typing up there?
Oh, I had to look up someone's name because I was about to say if there were 4 people I could vote for president, they'd all be fictional. They'd be the president from Independence Day. Like that speech on the airfield, man, like that's America, right? Fighter jets, freedom, tasty.
Or
Harrison Ford in Air Force One. Get off my plane. Right? Now, this, as a Republican, as a conservative, this is a little out of left field, but he did such a darn great job. Jedediah Bartlett from The West Wing. Yeah, I'd do him. I wouldn't, you know what I mean.
Gosh,
and
you have
and
just
then
ruined,
fourth place.
You've just ruined the minds of all of our listeners for this.
And then in fourth place is a tie between Madam Secretary, right, Tia Leone's character, and John Dutton from Yellowstone, which I haven't watched Yellowstone because I don't have time, but I did watch the 45-minute complete seasons 1 through 5 recap on YouTube, so I feel pretty qualified.
Or David Palmer from 24, played by Dennis Haysbert.
That's right. That's been a long time since
you're welcome
since
for that
I've
one.
watched that one. But we need to have. This feels like a slippery slope, but like I think we need some Hollywood screenwriters to be on to be on the cabinet. Like they apparently know what good politicians look like. Surprisingly, Hollywood doesn't. Screenwriters do. So I don't know. Bartlett for America. That's what I've got to say.
Yeah, honestly, like most of us over here know exactly how much of a joke our presidential politics are.
Right.
We're okay with it. Whatever.
I mean, I would rather have Donald Trump than a dictator wearing a military uniform sitting in the Oval Office.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Or for that matter, Joe Biden over a military dictator. As unpleasant as that has been, and as weak as he's made us look, and as senile as he's made us look.
True.
Bless his heart.
Oh yeah.
Still not as bad as John Fetterman.
Is he doing okay?
No.
I don't think
he's in the hospital again.
And Jimmy Carter, I was on his last leg. Speaking of politicians, yeah, I thought Fetterman was in the hospital. Not a stroke, but
apparently
something else.
Clinical depression. So that's no fun.
That?
Yeah,
no, not at all. Also,
it's a messed up story, honestly.
Just indeed, we've had a lot of interesting things, like the balloons, right? But
the balloons were just stupid, if we're honest.
I know, but here's the thing: as an aviation nerd, can you imagine the excitement of the fighter pilots? You're like, wait. It's been 20 years. I get to shoot something down, like for realsies?
And then he missed. Well, for the second one.
That's the thing. A freaking Sidewinder missed. I guess it was small. It was small. Okay. And they wanted to use the cheapest missile we had. And no, we couldn't use guns because Canada tried it and it just pokes holes in it and doesn't do anything. But nonetheless, I mean, could you imagine, like, that'd be, you spend your entire career waiting to press that pickle button for real. And he's like, I get to do it and I don't have to have a bad conscience about it. This is awesome.
It's an inanimate object.
Right.
And I get to blow it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Goodness. I'm just going to hit that button for now because this is just going to keep going, and we're going
This episode has been brought to you by political fiction and Top Gun Maverick, now available on all streaming platforms.
Bless our hearts. Go love God, love your neighbor, make some music. We'll see you next week.
See you next.